Welcome to tonight's episode of Secular Soapbox. Tonight's show is Ask an Atheist. These are the types of questions which we, the hosts, myself and Baphometal, get asked, and we'll be asking Bryce and K-Lub tonight. We are playing the role of devil's advocate, serving in the roles of Christians who ask or who question atheism. If you like what we do here at Skeptic Haven, please consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on our content. Also, feel free to interact with us and our guests in the chat and give this video a thumbs up. Now let's get started. Hi, guys.
What's up?
I fumbled over that a bit, but I hope everyone got the gist of what we're doing here tonight. Oh, thank you. So, how are you guys? How is everyone?
I'm good. I'm excited.
Good. Yeah. I am too.
Welcome
nervous,
to.
But...
Oh, don't be nervous.
I legit don't know what to do with my, should I have my hands on my lap? I feel like this is my normal, most comfortable thing, but it's in the way. Man, I've done
talk with my hands.
In fact, I'm going to
Yeah. Perfect. So, why don't you guys give us a little bit of a background on you? Who wants to go first? Bryce, how about you?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
So background on me, besides being a former host of this show, great job, by the way, guys, taking over. So like what you've done with the place.
Thank you.
So I think your audience probably is going to be mostly familiar with me, but I'll just tell the short version of the story. Please. I grew up in a fairly liberal Christian environment, not too fundamentalist, not too devout either. It was kind of a Christmas and, Easter type Christian situation. My extended family was more religious than my immediate family, but I did grow up with Christianity in my background, and so I had that underlying belief there. It got a little bit more serious the older I got. I joined the military. It got even more serious. I started getting really into religion and apologetics, and I was on an online warrior for Christ for quite a while.
Damn! You were one of those.
I was one of those.
I get those people in my comments a lot.
I get people who actually recognize me from those days. I just had a guy on my Facebook, hey, weren't you like a Christian who was arguing for da-da-da? And I'm like, yes, me. But that's fine. And, actually, I learned about critical thinking, and I learned about rational argumentation and logical fallacies, and realized that I did not have good reasons for believing the things that I did. And I also the thing that really kind of flipped it for me was I was trying to figure out how to make several different arguments work. There were these atheists challenging me, and I was trying to figure out how to make the arguments work and how to make them seem logically consistent in the Bible. And then it occurred to me that I was trying to lead the evidence where I wanted it to go, but I wasn't following the evidence where I led. I was trying to lead it to a specific conclusion, which meant that I wasn't really interested in the truth. I already decided what the truth was and was trying to make the evidence look like it was true. But as soon as I realized I was doing that, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? That's not how you do anything else in life. That's not how we decide facts from reality. And I was screwed, because from that, it was like I lost a whole night thinking about this, and realized that it kind of just collapsed like a house of cards. But the process was over a little bit longer, but there was a specific night when I realized I do not have good reasons for believing this. And I was panicked. I was scared, because at that moment I was basically an atheist, and so I kind of disappeared from the online scene to try to reformulate what my beliefs were. And when I showed up again, it was as a skeptic, and I've been doing that ever since. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that critical thinking would lead you away from religion? That's
it
so
should be a
weird.
class. It should be mandatory teaching in high school, because it's not just religion. It applies to all kinds of things that people believe in: astrology,
Yeah.
K-Lub is probably going to tell you about his ghost experiences from the past, and well, I'll just let him go ahead and do it.
Well, thank you
Honestly,
for that.
I think at the end of the day, it boils down to, I think if all you have is just space away and time to think, I think that's all it really takes to get out of the fundamentalist mindset at a minimum.
100%.
But honestly, our origin stories here are similar, but not quite. It's interesting. I always love how everybody's different perspectives come from their origins, and their origins are so radically. Anyway, I come from the wacko, psycho, evangelist Christians, the young earthers. If you speak it and you believe it in faith and pray for it, it's yours. So medicine and medicine's bullshit. Sorry, language. Medicine, junk,
God.
philosophy, junk. There's the big one was or another big one was the I can't believe I'm forgetting the word for it. Psychology. That's the big one that goes around a lot. Psychology was nonsense. Like my sister, for example, she just told me, and I'm so happy for her. She's getting out of it. I'm super excited. I hope we can talk about that later. But she was just telling me today that she's anyway. I'm sorry, getting really sidetracked. I actually lost my train of thought because I got so excited because this just today happened. Half an hour before the conversation. She's finally coming out of all of this, and it's hard for her actually. Anyway, we can talk about that later. But anyway, so this is the sort of environment that I grew up in. And it was very traumatic for me. My stepfather was the pastor, literally. He was the one at the pulpit. And he convinced me, my PTSD horror story here is that he convinced me that demons were in the vents. That's where they go to hide. That's where they go to flee. So like that was my big scary terror thing. So that was my upbringing. However, they at least, they would at least give me some time and space. I was in a split home, so I spent the summer with my dad and my stepmom, and they were as fundamentalists. But they only had us for the summer though, so they didn't really focus on that stuff. We were just out there having fun. We went to church once a week, but that's it. It wasn't really a topic of conversation. It was just sort of assumed that we were on board. So we were pretty good there. However, it was in high school when I realized that my views on evolution were junk. Obviously, evolution is true, and that was the first big thing for me. And that might sound stereotypical to theists, like, oh, that's evolution. And I'm going to reassure them, atheism and evolution have nothing really to do with each other. It's not like the reason. It was the first big thing that got me thinking that, oh man, something's off here. So after high school, as Bryce had mentioned, I'm not even wearing. I started looking more into supernaturalism and spiritualism, new agey sorts of things. I tried my hand at magic even. And I ended up landing in paranormal investigation. That was the big thing that had me hook, line, and sinker. I actually got so steeped into it that I was part of a group that traveled the tri-state area. People actually called us. I was a legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate. I was an EVP specialist, but I go on these investigations, and I tell you, it's so much fun. If I could go back and do it again, I'd do it all over again.
Who are you gonna call?
The ghost, you feel them. Dark, dude. So I ended up realizing, though, in this, I was becoming more and more critical of my evidence. Honestly, in hindsight, it was one of my partners had mentioned that he was actually starting to have doubts. So that started getting me to have doubts about it, because he was explaining just a little trick that can fool people into thinking it was a ghost. And I was like, oh, so that can make people just think it's there. It's not actually there. I wonder what else is like that. And then I learned about, here's the big one. This is probably the thing that really is the biggest, most important thing that I learned in my journey, and it was pareidolia. This idea that we as human beings have a tendency to make things look like there's other familiar objects, specifically like people and faces. So if you look at, if you just like have a popcorn ceiling and you stare at it, chances are almost everybody can find a face somewhere on that ceiling. So that's pareidolia. And I started to realize that phenomenon, if you extend it out, explains almost all of this supernaturalism that we experience as human beings. And we can dive into that later as well, because that gets really niche and down the rabbit hole. But that was the big thing for me. And so at that point, I started having significant doubts. And then I started looking into the theological conversation. I never really took the theological conversation seriously. And admittedly, I am a Matt Dillahunty guy. He was the one that absolutely convinced me. And anymore, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not 100% with that. I agree with about 80% of what he says anymore. And I love the man, and I truly appreciate him. He's forever changed my life, and I owe him everything for that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so he actually, I'll go ahead and say it, he was, of all the people in the world, I'd say he was the most singular, most influential to me in my deconversion. And then second in line would be Hitchens, because he kind of filled in the pastor role for me, honestly.
Right.
That
I
I kind of.
That.
But anyway, then I found myself doing activism and landed here and participated with Bryce on the not the Bryce's Right, excuse me, the Secular Soapbox, this show. And
you were on the Bryce's Right once or twice too.
Yeah, I do remember. That was fun. I love this show. The Bryce's Right was so good. Everything about that show was just, oh gosh,
I might go back to that at some point.
You had that. It was perfect. I don't do this very often, man, but it was. I missed it. That was a good show. Anyway, I'm gonna do too much talking, so I'm gonna pass the ball to somebody else.
Well, I'm kind of disappointed now, because I thought I saw Jesus in a tortilla the other day, but I guess not. I guess
disappointing.
Not.
Yeah.
It is very disappointing. Thank you for disappointing.
So now we're atheists, and we're here to answer any questions about atheism.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, by the way, everybody in the chat, feel free to ask questions. We will be interacting with our guests over here.
We're being the devil's advocate.
So I have a question for you all. Who hurt you?
Oh,
Who hurt us? Yeah. Go ahead, K-Lub.
Yeah.
It might sound like a joking question, but honestly, I can say that.
Did I stutter? Do I look funny to you?
Honestly, I gotta give it to my parents more than anybody. Of all the people in my life, I think that they messed me up the most. I love you guys, by the way. Mom and Dad, I love you guys. Don't get me wrong. I do love you.
The reason why I brought up that question is because I have been asked that question myself. Because it is a very dismissive way of a person's experiences. They're assuming that you were hurt in some way by religion, by God. You're disappointed. Something went wrong in your life. Therefore, you are atheist now, and you should probably repent and turn around. So when someone asks you, who hurt you?
I mean, I would say that people who approach it that way, people who instinctively ask that question, they're looking at it from a very most likely American-centric view of theism and atheism, because if that question would make no sense if you asked it in Japan or Sweden, where most people were raised without religion at all. You know, they've never had this concept of Christianity. So if you ask a Japanese person, who hurt you to make you turn away from Christianity? You know, why would I, you know, I was never in Christianity. Why would I, you know, turn away from it? Why would you think I was hurt? So it's a very limited perspective, and you can tell that they don't know much about the rest of the world when they ask questions like that. But from the perspective of someone who's just indoctrinated in the United States, where most people are Christian and most atheists have come out of Christianity, it might make sense from that perspective. If you had asked me that several years ago, even probably last year, I would have said nothing. And my deconversion story is exactly as I told you But looking back in hindsight now, I can see that I was harmed by Christianity. I didn't see it at the time I was in it, and it's not the thing.
That's how I was answering the question. When he asked that, I thought that he was like, who's done the most damage?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I would say that I can certainly look back with the benefit of hindsight to see the damage that it caused. It certainly hindered me socially. relationship-wise, sexually. I'm a member of the LGBTQ. I'm on that spectrum, and so Christianity gave me certain ideas about how to view people like that, including myself, that were harmful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shaming, self-hatred.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how harmful it was until after coming out of it. And also just conceiving of the world, it limited my understanding and my way of acquiring new information. Just being resistant, taking for granted that the supernatural existed and that God must be a thing and must be the only explanation for the things that we see, without even considering other possibilities, and learning about that stuff much later. K-Lub mentioned psychology a little while ago. I have a degree in psychology now, and psychology is learning about the mind, the human brain, and human behavior is devastating to the concept of a soul or an afterlife or things that I grew up believing in and accepting for most of my life, and then realizing that this is definitely not true. Like this, if there's anything about religion that's false, it's the afterlife. There is no such thing. There can be no such thing based on what we know about how consciousness, what is composed, the elements of consciousness.
But what if you're wrong, sir? What if you are wrong?
Well, if I'm, what?
And you're taking everyone to hell with you.
I don't claim to have solved the problem of hard solipsism, and we could all be brains in vats. We could all be plugged into the matrix, and we'd never know. But we have to make do with the information that we have available to us, and the best way we have acquiring information is empiricism, as far as I can tell, through sensory experience. And there's nothing in our sensory experience that speaks to the supernatural. There are explanations for experiences that people have, which they attribute to the supernatural, but they're all naturalistic explanations, So, I learning about that is that was another, I don't want to say it was a nail in the coffin, because I learned about that after I deconverted. But once I learned about the brain and personality and identity and memory and all these different aspects of consciousness that are tied to specific functions of the brain, that's when I realized that, how did I ever believe in a soul? How did I ever think that made sense? It can't, there's no room for a soul anywhere, and if there's no room for a soul, how can an afterlife work? It just doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know if that was your question. I just kind of feel like I was rambling on there, but yeah,
it's hard.
No, I think the question you asked had something to do with who hurt me or something like that.
That was the question.
I was thinking about the demons and the vents, and I was like, that's kind of. But
it just sounds like you don't have faith. You just gotta have faith. That's all it is. So
you don't have enough of it.
You gotta have faith, and you have to look at the trees.
I have no faith.
But have you looked at the trees?
Have you looked at the trees?
I've looked.
You haven't heard that one?
No.
God damn it! I'm trying to be the character here, but nobody's going along with it.
I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's one of the most common ones.
Oh,
you haven't heard that one? Are you serious? Oh wow!
Ray Comfort, and there's all kinds of apologists that look at the trees. It's the argument from design.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I know the banana one.
Same thing. Yeah, that's. I think that's evolution. But,
that's my favorite one.
Yeah.
Okay. You should do that one. Okay.
Anywho.
Yeah, looking at the trees is just another way of just saying, isn't it so obvious?
Right. Okay. Just
duh.
Trees. Okay, I get it. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan because if you want to get pedantic about it, really it boils down to more of the teleological, because that's the only reason anybody would bring that up. There's got to be a reason for it to be this beautiful.
Yeah.
Look at the banana tree.
That's good. Yeah. Okay, what else? This is getting fun.
Okay. You do the next one, Bath. I want to see which one you pick off of our question.
Oh, okay. Let's see. How Have you been confronted with some information that shook your atheistic foundation, such as scientific arguments for intelligent design? That's an oxymoron. I get it, but still, you get the gist of the question.
I have been confronted with the argument from intelligent design, but it's not really a good argument. And anyone who's ever presented it, it raises more questions than it answers.
I don't think it's even an argument. It's
not really an argument, but look, it's the argument from design. None of these arguments really work. Once you understand, I mentioned critical thinking, rational argumentation, logical fallacies. They're all fallacious. The way to recognize design. I think K-Lub mentioned Matt Dillahunty earlier, and I'm stealing his little monologue on this. But the way to demonstrate design is by demonstrating the designer. You don't, and beyond that, we recognize design by contrasting design things by what occurs in nature. So you can't presuppose the supernatural by doing that. And theists don't really have a way of distinguishing between designed things and undesigned things because they begin with the presupposition that everything is designed, right? Yep. This is why the argument from complexity doesn't work either, because like Ray Comfort, he's like, look, this is the human body is so complex. The human eye is so complex. It has to be intelligently designed, but you think rocks are designed. So complexity is irrelevant, like why even bring up complexity if it's all designed, it doesn't make any sense. And also complexity is not a hallmark of design. Simplicity is. I was in the Air Force and I worked on aircraft avionics. So the simpler engineers intentionally design things to be as simple as possible if they're intelligent. Sometimes they design things complicated and it's a pain in the ass and more things go wrong and it breaks. But the idea is to be as simplistic as possible. Less can go wrong and it's more efficient that way. So complexity doesn't work and you can't distinguish between design things or undesigned.
We don't have a point of reference, right? We don't have a world that's designed versus a world that's not designed for us to be able to compare and say, oh yeah, this one is designed, this one is not. So it's all assertions.
I think this one basically I think that the power here is that it's intuition based. And by the by, this is generally speaking, as people living in the world we live in, that's a powerful draw for most people. And I actually get that because that was one of the things that earliest. I mean, every once in a while, if there's going to be an argument, it's going to be something either teleological like this, like the design argument, or something about consciousness. Sometimes those can kind of make me go, huh? But like I said, I think this really boils down to what your intuitions are. And I think you can sort of change your intuitions on this by will and force, if you will. Because I used to really be drawn to that idea, but now it has absolutely zero impact on me because I've actually convinced myself that everything always was, always is, always will be. So there never was a creation. So that idea just doesn't even resonate with me anymore. I'm just absolutely convinced of my own paradigm. So I just don't have it. It just means nothing to me anymore. It's just white noise. And it sounds ridiculous, like you guys are saying.
Yeah. So we do have some questions in the chat. Yeah. So, Wes, you can put them on the screen, but we have one from Atheist Uprising. It says, what do you mean when you say you're an atheist? So who wants to take that one? So a lot of people think that's like a worldview. Do you think people get that mistaken a lot of the time? How would you
eat babies?
That?
What?
I can tell you. So I'm not one of these people that gets caught up or hung up on what words mean. I think that's the most boring conversation in the world, because words don't mean anything. They're just sounds that we make. The goal is to communicate, something about you to someone else in a way that they understand it. So what I mean by atheist, when I use atheist towards myself, is depending on the context. It depends on the context of the conversation, but generally speaking, I am not convinced that the supernatural is real. And therefore, I'm not convinced that any gods who are claimed to be supernatural are real. That's broadly what I mean when I say I'm an atheist. If a specific religious person comes up to me and asks me, why don't you believe in God? Or, are you an atheist? I'm going to interpret their question from the framework of their own religion. So if a Muslim comes up to me and says, do you believe in God? I'm assuming he's talking about Allah. And then I can tell him, no, I don't believe that Allah exists. I think that's a made up religion.
I want to poke at this a bit. What about a, quote, non-supernatural God? Take, for example, what if...
I was very careful in my language. So.
Right?
But go ahead.
But,
yeah.
I can't remember if it's panpsychism or what have you, but what if all of everything is God and we're just an emergent byproduct of his essence?
Yeah. Pantheism? Is that
I can't remember quite. Like, would you say that that's...
So here's what I think about. I mean, I think that there's simpler examples we can go to. There are people who worship the sun, right?
Right.
They treat
the sun as God.
The sun is a real thing that exists, and it is natural. It exists in the natural world. It was naturally formed through, chemical processes. So I believe that the sun exists. I believe if someone wants to call that God because they worship it, yes, I believe that God exists. I don't understand why you would worship it, though, because it's just, there's no agency there of will controlling anything. And so I don't really understand the concept of
my ancestors I'm from Peru, and the Incas would worship the sun, right? Inti Raimi. And I mean, the sun was what gave the energy to the crops. And, if there was no sun, there was no crops, there was no food, there was no life. So... But yeah, I get what you're saying.
I think a bare minimum definition of God would be the most powerful being. And if all of everything is God, that would be the most powerful being. Okay, so we're not talking about the sun, we're not talking about a cup. And I'm interested to like.
Did you say the most powerful thing?
You say that according to you, atheism. I'm just being pedantic because your definition of atheism doesn't really apply to this God. If this God existed and you believed in him, you'd still be an atheist.
Well, no, I would believe. So I define atheism as, I'm not convinced that gods exist. But if someone defines the sun as their God, I am convinced that the sun exists. So I wouldn't be an atheist to them. But to someone who is any of the other religions that have unfalsifiable, invisible, silent, intangible, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, one of those kinds of gods, I'm not convinced that they exist. So, as far as they're concerned, I would be an atheist. So it really depends on how the question is formulated.
Sure.
When it comes to the God of classical theism,
atheism is more of a response to the proposition, right?
Yeah.
So it varies.
I actually kind of disagree with that a little bit because. I actually tend to think that atheism is actually the belief itself that no gods exist. That's actually where I stand on it. I think that if you lack belief in this, then you also don't believe in this. If you lack belief in fairies, you don't believe in fairies. It's just the way it is. So my thing on that, though, however, is that my definition is twofold because to be an atheist and theist, you kind of have to have a common denominator being God unto itself. That's why I was poking at the supernatural caveat that he wanted to add to that. I thought that was unnecessary. No offense, Bryce.
That's because I think that's because you define God as necessarily supernatural. And to be fair, most people, it would. So, but if you don't, though, then that means if natural gods exist, then it doesn't matter if the supernatural is real or not, because
I think the supernatural is irrelevant. I think it's a non sequitur. I'm actually this might be annoying to some people. Throwing out some words here. Supernatural non-cognitivist. I think that word is nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. I think that any version that we can define that, it's actually just another way to say a different kind of natural thing. But regardless, I take the definition of God to be that which all else emanates from, or emanated from, or it comes from. But caveat being, this thing is also a person. That is God. Okay. That which all of these things come from, and it's a person.
Then I would be an atheist because I do not believe that exists. So now let me ask you, Caleb, would you consider me an atheist? Because I didn't say that I believe that does not exist. I said I'm not convinced that does exist. So
Yeah, you're going to hate me. I think that the semantic collapse holds here. I think that does implicitly state and implies, Bryson, you ergo
I'm
believe
fine
not.
with that.
You think that God does not exist because you are not convinced it exists.
So,
Sure.
are there
I don't have a problem with
denominations
that.
of atheism, just like there's different denominations of Christians? So are you saying you're not a real atheist? You're like they say you're not a real Christian.
It's a
like
good
Bryce
question.
said, I'm not a huge fan of this conversation. At the end of the day, we're bickering about what words mean when Bryce is right.
Yeah.
Haha, I love that shit, by the way. But Bryce is right.
Yeah.
As long as as long as you can get on board, make sure you guys are talking about the same things. You can ignore these terms altogether.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter as long as we understand each other. But the answer to your question, Stacy, is yes. There are not different denominations of atheism as there are in religion, but there's many different schools of thought. There's as many schools of thought in atheism as there are atheists, because there's no doctrine of atheism. There's no church of atheism. There's nothing that says an atheist must adhere to these tenets and must believe these things. No, the only thing we have in common is we're not convinced that God exists.
Yeah.
For some of us, we are convinced that no God exists. For some of us, we're only convinced that some gods don't exist and we're skeptical of others. For some of us, we prefer to identify as agnostic, just not really sure, don't really care. But yeah, we're not following a religion and we're not actively acting as though there is a God. That's really the only thing that I think all of us who use that label have in common. But everything else inside of that, everything else outside of that label, we believe all kinds of different things.
Yeah, that's true, because I've seen that.
You guys probably believe stuff I don't believe. I probably believe stuff you guys don't believe. And
I'm a Pastafarian.
There you go.
Ramen.
Perfect.
Why do you worship science?
I actually had someone say that to me. They say I can't be an atheist because atheists they agree with science and they like science too much, and I don't know how that these people follows. Were. I know they were very anti science. So
yeah, this is another problem with words. I think this word worship, we really need to figure out what the person means when they say worship. Because what does worship mean? Like, I don't. If by worship you mean praying,
I go to the lab every Saturday and I just say thank you.
Yeah, I don't
guess
do
what
any
they mean
praying,
is, why do you rely on science? Right? Some people do ask that stupid ass question, and they don't understand the basics of what the scientific method is. For example, right? They don't understand that science is self-correcting, self-discovering, and only better science trumps science, and they don't understand that.
And it works. They're saying, but they should understand that it works. We are talking through an electronic device that lets us transmit our voices and images all across the world. That's science,
I've heard this, the argument that science is so unreliable, but it's so unreliable, Bryce.
And yet they're the same people relying on it,
Right.
Like we go to the hospital to get medications and, things that like cure diseases. I mean, science works. Airplanes fly. Like we can prove that. It's based on the laws of physics and aerodynamics. So, just for the people who are willing to dismiss science, I don't believe them because they're reliant on science every day. Most of them, unless you live in a very undeveloped country that lacks electricity and the modern conveniences. All of the people who are making that argument are also reliant on science. No one gets behind the wheel of a car and lets Jesus take the wheel literally. Most people use both hands or at least one when driving, and they have their eyes at least part of the time on the road. I don't care how faithful you are. You don't just get into the car and pray to God and then start, reading your Bible and then hope you get to work. No one does that. They rely on the science of auto mechanics and, they don't rely on faith that the other people on the road are going to follow the rules of the road. They're actually looking. So
No.
I don't think that these are good faith. Yeah. Go ahead, Caleb. Sorry.
No, I think it's ironic because, I mean, Tesla, science, I mean, they beat Jesus to the chase on that one.
Yeah. 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 So, but it's not really a good faith question, and it's kind of nonsensical. And I think you have to have a way of showing why they don't even believe that. You know, we use science because it works. We rely on science because it's reliable. It's not foolproof. You know, any electronic or mechanical device breaks down. You know, biology is unpredictable. Diseases evolve. Medicines aren't going to cure everything. We haven't mapped the genome of everything yet. And things can go wrong, but just because we don't know everything yet, we can still make reliable predictions. And as long as they continue to be reliable, we're going to use that. You know, everybody's going to use that. Theist, atheist, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter. So it's kind of a silly argument. When we show scientifically why a theory fails or why it doesn't work or it's superseded by another theory, then we replace it with the better science. But it takes science to do that, right? And so that's what I think it was Baff who said science is self-correcting. That's why we use it, because it's self-correcting. Yeah. Religion, unfortunately, is not self-correcting. It takes thousands and thousands of years for the Catholic Church to make up its mind about, you know, whether people go to heaven or purgatory or hell, or, you know, what to do about.
It just changed the rules.
I won't get into the scandals, but yeah, it's very resistant to change. I'll just put it that way. We see that in Christianity, we see it in Islam, we see it in religion. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, good soapbox. So next question you can see on. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's a question right there.
Yeah. So do you think there's anything inherently wrong with believing in God?
I'll let Caleb go first this time.
Sure, go for it, Caleb.
Oh, inherently wrong, but that's kind of difficult to say. I am philosophically, I'm an anti-theist. Sociologically, like in my day-to-day life, I've really eased up on that quite a bit. I'm not as militaristic with it as I used to be. And by the by, like, just unto itself believing in God, no, I don't think that that's inherently bad. I don't. I think that it's even possible that, you know, it can perhaps inspire somebody to do X, Y, and Z, which is why I think that it's persisted as an idea to begin with. But I do think that it gives you a predisposition towards supernatural thinking, of course. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where the danger lies. Not the belief in God unto itself, because that's, you know, I don't think it's necessarily harmful to wonder if you have a sense of purpose, or if time works the way that you think it does, because, you know, God knows the future, or it's already made the future, whatever, you know, that sort of stuff. I don't think it really matters at the end of the day. So I would say, just to bottom line it, no, I don't think inherently belief in God is bad, but I do think that it leaves you incredibly exposed to thinking that's going to be a detriment to rationality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my answer would be it depends. I've gone back and forth on this in my head, trying to come up with the most fair answer and the most fair and true answer. And it's been difficult, because on the one hand, I want to say yes, because I think that if you are believing in anything without sufficient reason, then just what Caleb said at the end there, you are believing irrationally, and that opens you up to all sorts of scams, and it's a sign of gullibility. You know, if you can believe in something without evidence, you can believe in anything without evidence, you know. And so I think that we have to have rationally justified beliefs. Otherwise, we don't have a good foundation on our epistemological framework. Kind of breaks down. It's broken because we don't have rationally justified beliefs. So in that sense, I would say it's bad. However, I don't think it's all bad. For some people, believing in God gives them hope. It gives them and something to, you know, people have questions. We're very curious creatures, and we don't have the answers to everything. One of the things you learn in psychology is religion is a coping mechanism for a lot of people,
Yeah.
And because we're so uncomfortable not knowing, because we want to, fear of death, fear of the unknown. People don't want to die. They want to live forever. You have pretty much every religion saying that you go on. It's a very attractive thing to look at, and for people who have not ever coped with this idea of death or, not seeing their loved ones again or having people close to them pass away, thinking that they're in heaven, that they could reunite with them. That's what people, it keeps people away from depression because they've never learned alternative coping mechanisms. So in that sense, I would say that maybe believing in God is not bad for that person. God of the gaps, science, the things that we don't understand. Where did we come from? Why does the universe exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? All of these questions that people have been asking for years and years, we don't know the answers to them. And so kind of making up an answer makes us feel better. And if it's God, if it's gods, plural, if it's, the multiverse, whatever the case may be, if it's aliens, I don't know. But some people believe in astrology and that the movement of the stars are signs that guide our, experience. Human beings need to believe in something. I only want to believe in things that are true, and I value that more than believing in things that just make me feel better. But that's me. Someone else, that the truth hurts. I think Lizzo has a song, "Truth Hurts." Some people who have not learned to cope with reality aren't ready for the truth, or they don't really care what the truth is. They would rather believe in something that they can that gives them hope, gives them meaning or purpose to continue on. So believing in God is not inherently bad. It can be bad. And it can be particularly bad when people use it the wrong way or when their beliefs lead them to harm other people, which unfortunately happens very often. So to me, it usually results in a bad outcome. And even for the people who are using it as a crutch but are not really hurting anyone else, it is preventing them from forming, I think, rationally justified beliefs, at least on religion and possibly in other areas of their life too. So from that aspect, it's harmful. But the question for me is it doing more harm than good? It depends on the person. It depends on the individual, and it depends on the effect that they have on the other people around them. So that was my long and convoluted
great answer. Holy crap.
I think it's a good answer. And I mean, if I could just give a quick answer to that too, I feel like if you have to kind of take the people out of it and just think of like the actual religion and the idea of it, because I think apparently it is wrong, because when you boil it down, what it's actually teaching, like, yeah, it might give someone hope. Like I'm sorry, I'm going to use my grandmother as an example. Sure, it gives her hope. She's near the end of her life, but she has pretty much nobody else because her beliefs have just completely like sheltered her in, and she's just made it so that nobody wants to be around her. She has no compassion for anybody else. She's living alone in her apartment. We see her because we are literally all she has, but she has no compassion for like the LGBTQ community, which are in her family. She's just completely isolated herself. And if that's her only hope is just living to die, which she's been like her whole life, then yeah, I think it is inherently wrong because she has such a narrow view of the world. And so my take is just, I think it is because you see so small the world around you.
When you read that, it sounds to me like when you read God, you mean Yahweh.
Yeah, that's how I'm thinking. Yeah,
I tend to broaden that out.
Yeah. My view is the God of the Old and New Testament is what I think. That's how I grew up with.
So that's why I say it depends on the question. It depends on the person. It depends on what they're asking me about. That's another, again, language, right? God. What do you mean by God?
For me, it's that because I still get very heated, and I also kind of, when I was a Christian, I did have a bit of a smaller Like I wanted to kind of isolate myself in a weird way. And ever since
Right.
I left, I was like, oh my gosh, my heart expanded. I have so much love. I don't have to be so like closed off and closed-minded. So I do think it's inherently wrong, if I can answer that. So anyways, this
How about
is
you,
not...
Beth? I don't think you answered.
I totally agree with what you said, Bryce. It promotes a lack of critical thinking. You're dismissing evidence. You are self-fulfilling prophecies, like you could say. How do you say it? Self-fulfilling prophecy, or like,
yeah,
you already have a predisposition, or you already know what it is, so you find ways to make it true, right?
right.
What do you call that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm ESL. Sorry. I'm gonna continue to use that all the fucking time, by the way. So yeah, I also think that it could vary, I guess, depending on what God you're referring to. So that is a good point. We shouldn't always focus on the Christian God from the Bible.
It's hard for me not to, but
right. Yeah. But I mean, our experiences are only what they are, right? So we are only responding to what we're familiar with. I'm familiar with Catholicism. I grew up Catholic, so I can only tell you about, that standpoint. And you grew up Christian, and so on. But yeah, I personally think anything that has to do with a belief that's based in something that has no evidence is bad. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Beth, you want to read this question?
Okay, we have a question. Oh, what are we doing? Yes, that one. Okay. If you were convinced that God truly existed, meaning the God of the Bible, who is perfect. Can't say that with a straight face. Hold on. Who is perfect in every way, full of justice and mercy. Sorry. With that.
Okay, I'll finish. Our Creator and our Redeemer.
This is great.
Would that be good news or bad news?
So this was a particularly difficult question for me because I consider myself a Gnostic atheist on this particular God claim. This is one where K-Lub would acknowledge that I am actually an atheist by his usage. I believe that the God of the Bible does not exist. Right. And I also believe that the God of the Bible cannot exist because it is defined with logically contradictory properties that cancels itself out of existence. The Bible is so contradictory. It makes contradictory statements about God.
Yes.
No one has seen God at face to face at any time. For I have seen God face to face. Things that directly. Yeah. So this God to me,
justice and mercy cannot all exist at the same time.
Doesn't he write on the wall? Right? He writes on the wall. He burns on the bush, but then he's invisible.
So because of that, it's almost like a poisoned question because you're asking. It's like asking me if you were absolutely convinced that a four-sided triangle existed, would you be able to use it to fill a square? It's a logically contradictory thing. However, let me try to be as fair as possible. The way that I can answer it is by putting on my old Christian hat and thinking about the way that I used to conceive of Christianity when I was a believer. I didn't view it as contradictory at that time. It seemed to make sense to me. I had a lot of cognitive dissonance, and I twisted myself in pretzels a lot trying to find my way out of these contradictions and loopholes. But I never really believed in hell, like the hell doctrine that K-Lub probably grew up believing in. That never made any sense to me. Yeah, but to me, that was something that was contradictory. It maligned the character of God. And, if I began with this premise that God is good and God is love, then he couldn't have made hell because that's the most unloving, evil thing that you could. So a man clearly came up with that, an evil man who's trying to not scapegoat, but what do you call it when you're trying to frame God as being evil? And that got into the religion. And so this is the way I conceived it. So I never really, accepted a lot of those things. I just kind of went down one direction. I cherry picked the Bible just like every person who reads it has to cherry pick it. But I cherry picked it in such a way so that God came out as the good guy.
Mhm.
For real, in a way that anybody could see it, you know. So when people talked about perfect justice and perfect, exactly the same, justice meant mercy, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
Let's
in
just drown
reality,
everybody. Let's just drown everybody.
well, in reality,
Yeah,
K-Lub
that's
is
the most
right. They
perfect
are,
way to handle that situation.
yeah, but here's the thing, though, you guys, you know, the drowning of everyone that happens in the Old Testament, right?
Right.
And all of these things, and I'm a Christian, right? And we fall under the new covenant, which is the testament of Jesus Christ from the
Mhm.
Gospels and the Pauline epistles. So that's stuff that happened in the whole Old Testament. Everybody was evil, and they were causing so much destruction and harm in the world that God had to get rid of
He had to do it.
good, you know.
Yeah.
So
The bottom line,
so-
is, Bryce. Bottom line, are you gonna
bottom
be?
line
Are you gonna have moral fortitude and integrity to because you know we can accept that the perfect justice, all that. Let's throw that out. But let's bottom line, the Christian guy. Okay.
I would
his
say
current flaws. Are you gonna tell him you to his face?
Because of what K-Lub said and the contradiction between perfect justice and perfect mercy, I don't think both of those things can exist at the same time. If the God of the Bible is all merciful, which is something he's claimed to be by people, if he existed, would it be a good thing? Sure. If he's, but actually, I have to walk that back. No, not really, because if he's all merciful, that means that Hitler and all of the most evil people in the world get to get the same reward in heaven as all the good people do. So no, that all mercy is bad and all justice, both of those things are bad. So no, I'd have to say no, it would be a bad thing. We would have to reformulate what God is to be something other than what the Bible.
Was that the question? Was it a good thing? I thought it was, would you worship it or something?
Oh yeah, there's
I
a second part to it actually.
Would that be good news or bad news?
Oh, okay.
Would you be willing to follow him and honor him if he were truly God?
Okay, so the two-parter. I agree with Bryce on the first part of there. I think that would be terrible news. Absolutely awful news, because the God of the Bible to me is the wrathful, vengeful, jealous God. I don't see this benevolent, loving thing that most Christians see. Excuse me. However, that being said, if that was the universe I found myself in, I'm looking at eternity here. So by all means, if I got to lick some jelly out of some toes in heaven to make that happen, that's what I'm doing for eternity. Whatever it takes to stay out of the furnace. But it's pragmatic. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that this is a good guy making the rules.
Yeah, and I think the problem with this is that wouldn't an all-knowing God see right through that? I mean, I could fake it.
Yeah.
Oh, you froze, my friend.
Oh no. God
Right,
did not like that answer.
Yeah,
God is interfering
the point
right
I was
now.
making was that if it's an ultimatum, divine intervention. No, if it's an ultimatum where your choice is to either worship God or go to a hell where you're burned for eternity, well, then of course I'm going to make the choice to worship him, but it would be fake, right? I don't respect the God.
Right.
I'm only doing it because he's threatening me. It's like somebody holding a gun to your head. I'm going to give them the money.
It's free will, Bryce. It's free will.
But so I would be faking it. So then the question is, wouldn't God see through that? It would know that.
But he knows your heart.
He knows your heart, right? And so, like, I couldn't love a God that was evil or that I perceived as evil. I could fake it, but it would see through that. And so it's kind of a pointless thing. I could only love a God that appeared to be doing good things to me. And love is, I don't think that that's a choice. I think that's just,
It's also interesting how a perfect God requires worship. That makes no sense to me since I was young. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
It's a
Why
good
does he need us to-
indicator. It's a good indicator that it's probably not good. If it's asking, expecting, demanding worship, probably not good. Because people who are worthy of worship don't ask for it. They don't expect it, They people who are, when we have war heroes come back from the war, they don't like to call themselves heroes. Other people will, based on what they've done. If you are a Purple Heart or Medal of Honor recipient, you don't see yourself necessarily as a hero. You were just doing your job, but other people will consider you a hero because not everyone would have done that, you know? And so you have worshipers, but you don't deem yourself worthy of worship because of what you've done. If you did, then you're not worthy. So that's my spiel.
Yeah. So how do atheists deal with evil and suffering in the world?
It's all free will. It's all free will, Stacy.
Sorry, it's all free will.
Well,
we certainly don't just wait. I said by doing something about it, we're not just gonna wait around and hope the pray fixes the problem. How do atheists deal with evil and suffering in the world? I honestly don't understand the of what the thrust of what they're trying to get at with that, because to me it's like the same thing you would, I guess, like deal with the problem.
I think because Christians will say, oh, well, evil and suffering is a result of the fall, so that's why we have it. So I guess
are we just addressing the problem of evil then? Is that what
like why is
question
there,
is about?
Why is there evil and suffering if there's no God?
Oh, why is there evil and suffering in the world?
So maybe that's the direction the question is taking. So if
I think that the best person to answer a question like this is actually the person who's asking the question. I know who's asking the question, and he's an archaeologist and who studied anthropology as well. And that's the explanation for why there's evil and suffering. We are limited beings of limited knowledge and limited resources sharing space with each other, and we have to negotiate that in the best way that we know how, and we have to figure out ways to share limited resources and to share knowledge and figure out who's going to come up on top. And we're also subject to the laws of physics. You know, we are suffering isn't I differentiate between evil and suffering. Evil, it leads to suffering, but not all suffering is the result of evil, right? Suffering can be the result of natural disasters, diseases, accidents, things like that. And those things, we are subject to those things because we are physical things. That we evolved to fit the environment, but the environment isn't always the same. And so we have to continue evolving to fit the environment, and the process of evolution, you know, it necessitates genetic mutations. Sometimes they lead to survival advantages. Sometimes they lead to survival disadvantages. Sometimes people come out on top. It's, you know, it's not necessarily an intent behind why there is suffering. We suffer from starvation because our bodies need sustenance. We get hungry because that's how we replenish.
Because at the end of the day, bumper sticker it up, man. It's because we have lived in, or we're products of the laws of the jungle. Everything is. It's all red tooth and claw at the end of the day. That's where we come from. And if that's it. I mean, theist or atheist alike. I mean, that's clearly what the problem is that everything has to struggle to survive. It's red tooth and claw, and that's it. That's the problem. How do you solve that? Well, honestly, let's go back to our real God, science. That's probably going to be the best possible solution or producer of a solution, if there is one. I honestly don't know if there is such a thing as utopia where there is no suffering. At least not in this universe, but I'm not perfect, so I can't create a perfect universe. But you would think.
To me, the goal is to reduce suffering, but you know, and so that's a learning process. We learn. We get into ethics and morality when we talk about what to do about suffering, but it's a learning process. We have to. Sometimes we are just ignorant and we don't know what causes suffering until after the fact. And then we realize, oh, that probably wasn't a good idea. You know, slavery is something that has been practiced for many, you know, throughout human existence and many civilizations. And it was something that was very common in the West, you know, among Western civilization hundreds of years ago. We don't do slavery anymore, at least not legally. We've outlawed it because we recognize that slavery is bad, not only to the slaves, but for everyone else. Society advances faster when you don't have slavery. You know, the North advanced scientifically much faster than the South did because they embraced science and technology and not human labor. And so, you know, we have to learn that, you know, if you live in a society that condones bad things happening to some people, there's nothing to stop that from possibly being you. You could be on the receiving end of that, So that's not beneficial to you. There's nothing to stop slaves from rising up and killing their masters. That's a threat to you. Why would you advocate a society like that? And so we have to learn how to be more moral, and our capacity for empathy helps most of us do that. Most of us have the capacity for empathy, to recognize when other people are suffering, and it makes us feel a certain kind of way to where we want to address that. Not every single person has that. Some people have antisocial personality disorder. They're not able to empathize with others. There are sociopaths and psychopaths who can't be moral because they don't understand morality. But that does not apply to the average person. That's a small deviant subset. Most people have the capacity for empathy, and it's just a matter of which one of us is actually going to do something about it. Like K-Lub said, I think the Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing, right? Good people. So
I like that.
So yeah, that's my answer.
Awesome.
We got Leo Phileas.
So I have a question for Bryce and K-Lub. It's maybe a bit tangential. That word never.
Tangential.
Thank you, tangential. But I think it's still somewhat relevant, or could stimulate good discussion. Are you guys moral realists or moral anti-realists?
Go ahead, K-Lub. I've talked a lot.
Well, frankly, I'm a bit out of the loop on. It's been a while since I've been in these conversations, so I might be a bit rusty on the lingo here. But I think that the moral realist is to say that there's some ontology to morality, that there's an essence, physical, actual thing that is morality. I think, and I think that if I was going to pick up the two camps, I think that I am a moral anti-realist, I think, but I'm not sure. But hear me out. Okay, I'll just explain what I think, because I honestly don't remember which camp I'm in here. I think that by the by, it is just an idea. The morality is just a concept. There's not something that it's not a cog in the universe itself that keeps it going or has anything to do with the ongoings of reality. It's just not there. It's a byproduct of reality, and we find ourselves steeped in its power. It feels so real to us. It's where it comes from. And I think that insofar as reality is real, it's that we have now gotten sociologically to a point where we can kind of map this. I think we have a general idea of what we mean by this instinct that we have. I do think that this instinct, by the way, I'll get to the roots of it later, I suppose, but this instinct that we have, I think that we've sort of narrowed it down. And I honestly, oh man, a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but I think that T-Jump actually is the closest common denominator for morality.
No one hates you.
The things that we're actually talking about that most people care about. I think by that, for those that don't know, morality, what we're really talking about are impositions of will. So if you couldn't force somebody to do anything they didn't want to do, in that universe, you couldn't perform an immoral action against that person. And if you could come up with an example where you have not imposed onto somebody's will, and that is still immoral, that would falsify my statement. But I see, I think that's the closest common denominator that we have for the thing that we're actually talking about. But at the end of the day, I think that morality is a byproduct of the fact that we're a social species. And the things that we consider moral are those that allow us to cooperate together, to depend on each other. Those things which allow us to depend on each other are those things which we deem moral. So this is where, like truth, for example, like how does that fit in here? Well, if you can't depend on somebody to be truthful, then you have no reason to trust. Well, it's pretty obvious. You have no reason to trust anything they say, and everything goes. If somebody tells you there's not food over there, but there's food over there, and you take them on their word and they're lying, obviously that's a detriment to you. So because of our social upbringings, again, I think that morality is a byproduct of this feature of reality. It's those things that allow us to depend on each other are good, and if you want a bottom line, an easy bumper sticker version of what that means, it is now, I think, the understanding that anytime you impose on somebody's will, you're doing something immoral. If you're not imposing on somebody's will, you're not hurting anybody. You're fine. You're not doing anything immoral. It's either not immoral or amoral.
So I would say that I agreed with almost everything K-Lub said up until the end, and that's probably where I disagree a little bit. But let me start by saying that I think morality is a subjective term inherently. When people use the word morality, they mean different things, and there's different theories of morality and normative ethics. So for some people, morality might be doing what God says. So divine command theory. Well, to me, that's not morality, but for them it is, you know? So I always go back to definitions. What do you mean by morality? Because that's going to inform my answer. And I think Leah was asking about, you know, do I believe in objective moral oughts? If by morality, we're talking about well-being, which is kind of a different version of addressing what K-Lub said there, being dependent on each other. But I think that most people are talking about well-being when they're talking about morality. If that's what we're talking about, if that is the goal, doing good things for us, for other people, for the well-being of individuals and society, then I think that there are objective moral oughts. There are things we ought to do that are demonstrable, you know? If someone is in a mall, I don't know why you always go to this example. Malls are kind of outdated now, so maybe I should come up with a new example, right? But if someone is in a mall and they're having a heart attack and there's a defibrillator in a store that's closed, do I steal the defibrillator to try to save them from the heart attack, or is stealing a sin? Well, if stealing is a sin, then I ought not steal the defibrillator, even if it means that person dying. But if morality is about well-being, then I absolutely ought to steal the defibrillator to help save this person's life, because to me, morality is about well-being, right? So it depends on what we're calling, what our theory of morality is, what we think the goal is. Goals are subjectively chosen. I think the goal is human well-being. I think that's most people's goal as well. And I think it gets convoluted or distorted or perverted by the idea of divine command. I think that are taking away from human well-being. Divine command theory is not really a theory. It's just a set of moral assertions that come from commandments.
You're roboting out there, brother. He's gonna have to fix the connection.
He's cutting out.
And I'm back.
You're back. Yes.
I think I was. Yeah. Morality is divine command theory is not really a moral theory. It's just asserting that things are good because a God that you can't demonstrate says so. But that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help us resolve any moral dilemmas or anything. There are other theories of morality that do, and I think morality is a learning process.
Oh no. The same spot where you're trying to get this point across. That's okay.
Yeah, it's getting spotty now.
The same spot. Yeah, that's okay.
And to conclude the point, I would say that I'm a moral realist if morality means well-being, and if it means something else, then I'm probably not. So,
right.
Is that where you said you disagree with me on just our precise that, like you say, well-being?
The part that I disagreed with you on was if you interfere with the will of something else, or I can't remember how you put it, but the last part of it, you said you do something
if you do something
someone else's will. I don't agree with that. I think that I agree with that depending on the circumstance. There are people who are like an axe murderer. His will is to murder people with axes. If I take the axe away,
but what does he have to do to do that? So by definition, he has to impose on another person's will to murder.
Sure,
them.
He's doing that. I agree with you that what he is doing is wrong. However, what we do in response, which is imposing on his will, is not wrong, because we're just protecting ourselves. So it depends on the context.
I think it is wrong, actually. If you want to be really pedantic, I think that it is, of course, the lesser of the two evils there. I mean, do nothing or lock somebody up or put them whatever. I think obviously, we have to be a bit pragmatic here. We don't. Yeah, but that's because we don't live in the best possible perfect universe. But
is there such a thing though?
Not evil. No, I think it would be immoral. I think evil is a bit extreme. I think that's kind of a unnecessary. I think immoral is good enough. Is it immoral to put people in cages? Yeah, I think it is.
So that answers your questions about whether atheists have different schools of thought. We believe different things, and that's great.
That is good. Doesn't mean you have to agree on everything.
But I do agree that it's necessary. I'll put that out there.
There we go. Okay. Who's reading this one?
Oh, he is
Baph
muted.
Muted.
Baph, you are muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I have my XLR device that when you touch it lightly, it just mutes everything. Ooh, it's fancy. Ooh.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you see atheism evolving or changing in the future? And what kind of impact do you think atheism will have on society and culture?
I see it growing and expanding in the future, and I see it having a positive impact on society, culture in the future.
Yeah.
Now I can elaborate on that, but I can wait until K-Lub gives his answer.
Well, I'll agree with what you said wholeheartedly, and just sort of expand on that a little bit. How is it evolving and changing? Obviously, we're growing as a demographic, nuns and atheists, agnostic, just generally speaking, across the globe, not just here in the States. We are, as a whole, we're growing, so that is going to, by virtue of just that fact alone, change the world. And what sort of impact is that going to have? I think that it's going to create a rise of critical thinking, and it's going to be a huge blip in the historical record for future historians. I think that we're right here on the cusp of a great deconversion in history. I think that science is quickly outpacing theological belief, and I think that we were born just a little too early to really see it come to fruition, right? But I think that we get to bear witness to the advent of the downfall of theological thinking. I don't think it'll ever truly go away. I do think that there is a predisposition as a species towards this mode of thought. However, I do think that given our scientific knowledge and base, I still have the impulse. Like sometimes I still feel presence in the room, right? Like I still get those feelings sometimes. I just recognize what they are. However, I don't think, even if 95% of the world is like that, there's always going to be some group of people that take that and run with it. But by the by, I think that on the whole, it's going to affect society and culture significantly more. I think that, unfortunately, I don't really know how I feel about this, because I haven't given much thought into how much value culture unto itself has and what sort of effect it has on a society. So I honestly don't know what sort of impact that would have if all religious culture just ceased to exist. I honestly don't know, but I would wager to guess that on the whole it's better, but I'm not sure about the psychological effects. Admittedly, like I said, I do think that there's a drive that we have that even if we escaped it now today, it's just biologically, we're just not quite there.
Yeah, I don't think that will happen the way that, I'm not as optimistic as K-Lub is about there being like a radical revolutionary shift in the paradigm towards atheism worldwide in our lifetimes. I do think atheism is on the rise. I do think more people, just the fact that we're able to talk about it and we're able to do podcasts about it and that people watch it around the world. Right. Atheism, the taboo around being an atheist isn't what it was 20 years ago, much less 50 years ago or 100 years ago when nobody could really say that word out loud. Now we still have to come out as atheists, but I think that'll become easier as the generations pass. It'll be similar to what we've seen from the gay community, to where gay people are definitely more accepted in society now. I think that anti-religious people or atheists, agnostics, whatever, are going to be more accepted in religious societies in the future, but it takes getting to know us and seeing us as people who don't eat babies and who have different ideas about morality but still believe it's about well-being. It takes getting the theists in the different societies and cultures to know us and recognize us and see us as people, and then that will make it more that will make it expand. But I don't see religion ever going away, like K-Lub said. And you know, the real issue for me is organized religion and the impact that it has. That is something that needs to go away. Religion should be, it should only have ever been a personal experience where people, you know,
well,
you
I
can
think
share
that was actually
community.
the sentiment I was trying to convey. Thank you if that was, maybe I went a bit too far, but I did really mean organized religion. Like I said, I do think there's always going to be some demographic that holds this personal belief. But I think, I do believe that eventually organized religion on the whole will just become the way it'll be. I think it would be a great outlier. Maybe like, I don't know if you want to consider less than 10% an outlier, but I think probably within, not within our lifetime, certainly. I don't know if I gave that impression.
Okay,
but,
you did. That's why I was questioning it.
Oh no, I was trying to talk about future historians looking back. Even like I was like, because I'm talking way out there. You know, maybe a couple hundred years. That's in the earliest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I should have said future archaeologists. Maybe that would have been a better way to kind of get the point across. But I'm sorry, obviously I didn't say that well enough. But thank you.
Yeah. I envision, just to wrap that last point up, I'm a fan of Star Trek. I don't know if anyone watches that, but Gene Roddenberry's vision of the 24th century, I could see us moving into a worldwide secular culture that embraces science and exploration and investigation of, you know, other worlds. It takes secularism to do that. Religion is a hindrance to that sort of development and that sort of drive. And there are still religious people in Star Trek, but they're not widely represented. You know, that the average person is represented as a secularist. And I think that will kind of be what it looks like very far into the future, you know, but not within our lifetime.
Yeah. God willing. Yeah.
Oh, this is a good question. So this is the last one that we have from Aunt Kathy. It says, why do atheists who say they were once Christians, are they so angry with Christians?
Not all of them.
I mean, I think.
And why do you hate God?
Why do you hate God? Yeah.
But why do you see? Yeah, why are they so angry with Christians? I guess that's her question.
So,
well, I mean, honestly,
sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Well, I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Kim.
There's a rhyme and a reason for it, because we recognize the damage caused and the damage done, and for what it's worth. I mean, just earlier in this episode, we read a question that just said God and apostacy. What? I'm sorry. Apostasy. Okay, I'm sorry. Apostasy. You know, she just immediately went to the Christian God. Yeah, it took me, like I said, I used to be quite militaristic about this, actually, and specifically, more than all the rest, the Christian guy. I've kind of eased back on that myself a bit, as I said earlier. But I think that there's a good rhyme and a reason for that. I think it's a pretty obvious one. You know, for me, it was the demon thing with my stepdad that messed me up the most. That angers me the most, because that I still have very rare but occasional anxiety of hell, or the dream of it. It does still happen. I can't shake that, but I know it's just something that's just programmed in. I can't really do that much about. So that's why. But that doesn't mean that that has absolutely nothing to do with our arguments or our good reasons for being atheists. But I will say that I do think that there is a kernel of truth to the stereotype here. But I think that there's a good reason for that. I think that if this were primarily a Muslim country, the question would be posed for Muslims.
Right,
but
exactly.
Because we're in a Christian country, it's for Christian ones.
I just have to say that Azalea Jane just mentioned Who Watches the Watchers, which is a Star Trek The Next Generation episode that deals with this. It's one of the best episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. If you're curious about their take on religion and you know how, so yeah, I highly recommend that. So thank you for mentioning that. As far as the question goes, Aunt Kathy, I didn't grow up with the background that K-Lub had, or some of the other people who came out of a more fundamentalist, conservative Christian environment. And so I didn't have that experience. And I've never really had the angry atheist phase in terms of being angry with Christians. I see Christians as, to me, disappointed would probably be a better word. And the same thing with Muslims and people who believe in other religions, only in the sense that I feel like their own lives and their own family situations would be improved if they gravitated more towards rationalism than supernaturalism. But I can't be angry with them because I was a Christian myself, and I'm not angry with my past self for being a Christian. I was doing the best that I could with the information that I had and the knowledge that I had available to me at the time. I know more now than I did then, so my perspective has changed. So I can't really go back and say what a dummy you were for. I mean, I can say that, but to what end? It was what it was. I knew what I knew, or you only know what you know, right? So, and some people just don't know, and I admire the people who are skeptics, who already appreciate the value of skepticism and who ask questions. And it's okay to believe in things as long as you're asking questions and continually challenging yourself. Critical thinking is about challenging your own beliefs. Even I still do that with the beliefs that I have now. And so I just wish that more people would do that. But I don't harbor any anger to people who were raised in a religion, grew up surrounded by this, and were indoctrinated. I mean, it's not their fault. So, unless they're actively hurting other people with their religion, if they're out there like demonizing gay people or trying to take women's rights away or anything like that, if their religion is causing you to have a negative impact on the lives of other people, then I'm angry. But if you're just believing and minding your own business and it's something you need to do for your own inner well-being, and that's what then there's no reason for me to be angry.
Okay, that helps.
I mean, and for those individuals who are leaving a cult or, leave a very abusive environment that's tied to a religious belief.
Bad for them.
Right. And it sucks, but their reaction typically includes anger, right? And they're in all their right to be angry because they've been lied to, they've been abused. So also when you see somebody who might be reacting in a way that you don't agree with necessarily, like their anger, the way that they're expressing their atheism, I guess you could say. Try to also understand where they're coming from, like why they are angry, right?
Yeah.
So like tone policing, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and also some people are dealing with religious trauma too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So, and they're like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And when I came out of it and I read this whole information from Marlene Winnell on religious trauma, I realized this is what I've been dealing with my entire life. I thought it was just my personality and just me as a person, but this was brought on from religion. So that was just we need to just definitely be easy on people. But totally. You're running the...
Yeah, exactly. Big shout out to Recovering from Religion, fantastic nonprofit organization. They provide support to those who are doubting their faith, and they have a hotline 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT. That's an actual phone number that you can call. They have volunteers. They're very well trained, and they provide a good support and community for those who are deconstructing. Oh, and they also have the Secular Therapy Project, which is like a really awesome registry of therapists who are not associated with any type of belief system. So recoveringfromreligion.org. Big shout out to Dr. Daryl Ray, and Gail Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much, Bryce and K-Lub, for being our guest tonight. Thanks
for having us back.
The conversation, and thanks for letting us sit in your former seats, being the host and taking the
thanks for keeping them warm for us.
Do you like what we've done with the place? I mean,
not bad. You guys have kept it going. You've expanded. I'm really happy with the direction that this little project that we started 2 years ago has gone. And I like seeing it to all the other hosts of the other shows as well. I need to get back into it more once I get done with school. Then I can get back into it. But I just haven't had the opportunity as much.
Yeah, well, you're welcome back anytime. So
thank you.
Nice to meet you all. And where are you guys involved in any projects right now that you want to promote?
Not really. Like I said, I'm a little bit too involved with school. I do have a YouTube channel, Brycearonee. Most people know me by, where it was quite active several months ago. I've kind of lightened up a little bit, but I do plan on going active again.
Gotcha.
You know, and uploading some of my old stuff, and then also producing new content. But it's going to be later in the year. But definitely check it out and see some of the stuff that I've put up there. K-Lub is on there. So yeah, we have good times there. There's clips from Secular Soapbox. There's clips from Bryce is Right. So yeah, Brycearonee on YouTube.
Brycearonee.
Everyone should subscribe so that when you do have new content, they will be alerted. So
you will be notified.
Yes. And K-Lub, what about you?
Unfortunately, no. Until I'm able to quit my primary job and to do whatever I wanted, my actual job full time, I'm going to be otherwise preoccupied. Realistically, I'm looking at probably another 2-3 years, though, unfortunately.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to do this kind of thing from time to time. Hop in if you guys need or want someone to chat with or whatever. I'm more than happy to do this from time to time.
Nice.
I love this. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was great. So nice to meet you both. And
what about you, Stacy?
We're so polite. No, I'm here every Wednesday with you as my wonderful new co-host. And you can follow me on Instagram. I'm almost at 1,000 followers. I'm so excited. And then I'm also on like Twitter and TikTok and all that. But Instagram is where my is. So follow me there at Apostacie. And otherwise, I'll see you next week. And Baph, what about you?
I am part of a blasphemous podcast called the Burning Eden Podcast. We are comedy and satire, so if you want to check it out, the link is in the description, and you can also find me on TikTok if you have that horrible application on your phone. Don't download it if you don't have it, but if you have it, might as well follow me. I do funny crap. Might as well.
He's awesome.
I am pretty awesome. Thank you. We want to say thank you to our patrons here on Patreon, patreon.com/Skeptic Haven. If you like what we do here on this channel, we're going to say thank you to Tara S., Rion, Deneen Murphy, Dan D., Shannon Gray, The Bible Says What podcast, also a great podcast, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Sunny Shell, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Also, let you know that we have other shows on this channel. We have the Sunny Spot on Thursdays, the Global Atheists on Saturday, and Women Atheists Unload on Saturdays as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on all of these other awesome shows, guys. Come on.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will see you guys next week.
Thanks.
Bye.